And we're going live, and now we are live. So your project, Driftlist, has taken on quite a flurry of activity over the past 2 days, and I know that you've been working on not only the wireframes but also the Envision prototype, and it looks like that in the overnight. Because I was looking at your I saw that you shared the Envision prototype with me, so I immediately jumped in and was like, "Oh, okay." And then nothing was there. But then this morning, boom, it's filling in now, right? But
yes,
there were some things that I spotted in the prototype views that you have that I thought we could definitely level up. I know these are not the finished designs. Obviously, you're still fleshing out exactly what these are going to look like. But I do think that this is a good time to begin considering. Okay, what is the hierarchy that's going to be used? What are the cues that I'm going to associate with the typography that are going to basically tell me what role that information plays in the design, and how can I make this more scannable? There were a lot of people get into this thing with mobile design where they feel like, oh, it's a screen this big, so I have to squeeze it all in this screen, and we forget about the fact that people will scroll, and that's one of the great things. That's one of the great things about Envision is it will allow us to lock down a header and actually scroll if we want it to.
Okay, yeah, a couple of spots where I kind of wanted it to scroll, but I wasn't exactly sure how to do that, much less put that into Sketch. That will allow me to show that in the prototypes.
Right.
I tried to Google a little bit, but it wasn't yielding too much just yet.
Yeah. Envision's not quite like Googling HTML and CSS questions. It's a situation where it's a closed system, so there are significantly fewer people using Envision than use HTML, and obviously with code, it's a lot easier to ferret out those questions that are out there. But let's go ahead and jump in, and I think instead of focusing on Envision right away, I'd like us to focus on the actual designs themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open up Sketch, and I actually have you made any adjustments to your Sketch files this morning? Or?
Yeah. So that was the thing. Is I saw you had maybe started Mentor one. Upon reading your suggestions, had some extra time this morning, so I did fiddle around with, changing up a little bit of the size fonts in particular areas, and then I actually did a better job along those same lines of also trying to create styles that would make the change. Since I think uniform areas like input, menu headings that I kind of maybe would want to keep consistent, and considering that Helvetica New has so many different weights and sizes, especially as I work through the hierarchy, I wanted to make sure that I kind of was able to keep things consistent.
Okay, well, let's just go ahead and let's jump into the file. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So wave yourself. Oh, I love that part.
Oh,
that's the best part, isn't it?
A tube of me.
Yes, and off you go. All right, so with that in mind, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously, your splash screen is what your splash screen is. There are considerations I would make here, and I don't really like the design itself is fine. I think that this is all very, very modern, very iOS 9. It's when we get into this area that I become more concerned.
Yeah.
Because I'm always looking through and I'm like, okay, is that the if I remove that, is that clearer?
Yeah.
and it is, and I'm like, well, okay, well, what about the branding is important, right? Well,
Mhm.
it is, but are there other things that we could do? And a couple things come to mind immediately. One is like, what if you simply played it off like this, or you you had it floating away. What if you
Oh yeah.
just played it to the top, and maybe instead of having it in outline form, what if this was like they just flip it to where the light gray is inside of it, and now you have something that's really clean, but
Mhm.
you still have your branding. Now, again, I want to go
Okay.
back to what you had before. There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that, but I do think that it's not as it doesn't feel as modern. It
Yeah.
feels like there's lines working against themselves, and there's
Yeah.
no way of dancing around it. It's not as legible as that is,
Yeah.
right?
And I think
Now,
especially probably because the weight of the font is very light.
yeah,
Probably causes
yeah.
some
You're
craziness.
and you have your opacity down to near nothing anyway.
Mhm.
But I do think like even at like 3, it's significantly better than at 7.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's either you go lighter, you
Or
go
smaller.
smaller and above, like so,
Mhm.
or you go small like icon and up in more of a nav bar position. That's my thoughts on that.
Okay.
And really, whatever you opt to do there, I think it's fine. But I do think that this needs to be simplified somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's leave that where it is. This is fine. This again is fine. Obviously, if you okay, so you're doing location. The one thing I would say here is that oftentimes you want to indicate how you got to this,
Mhm.
and this is where a location icon comes into play. And I'm not sure if you've used this
Okay.
apps icons 8 app,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I use that.
it's pretty good. It also works much better with Sketch than it does with Illustrator. Um,
Mhm.
the Illustrator version of it is, or what it does with Illustrator is just painful by comparison. It gives you everything like at the picture, and you can't really edit the fill. It's no good. So here,
Mhm.
obviously, I drag it in. I can go into fills, and well, I don't want a gradient on it, but you get the idea. And now, if you take that down, you get a sense of where this is coming from.
Mhm.
This is I got Phoenix, Arizona because the location is turned on.
Okay.
Okay. And you might even have an icon that has this location crossed out, but a location icon, I think, is helpful in these instances to explain where that information is coming from.
Okay. Yeah.
So um, here, to get started, tell us where you'll be taking off, current location, use current location. I like let's go. I don't
Mhm.
think let's go can be really available yet until you have current location selected.
Uh. Okay.
Okay.
And actually now I'm seeing where there's going to be an issue with stuff. So I have to create a inact button text style.
Right.
Okay.
So keep that in mind.
Mhm.
So immediately we get over here to taking off from Phoenix, Arizona. I think a lot about this is good. Like this up here is working fine.
Mhm.
I like I forget what app this is beginning to feel like, but where you've got the clear button that's kind of stepping over the boundaries and breaking. The one thing that I look at and I'm curious about is what's happening here when we get down to these smaller elements. So that's like 10. And Helvetica New is problematic for you from the perspective of it's a fairly square font, but it's really light. And there's not a lot that Thin's going to be able to do for you. You probably be better off going with profile like this, and considering like a slightly smaller size. It might be a situation where obviously that's a little too much, but spreading out the character spacing a little bit might help. But as it stands, this profile isn't nearly as readable or legible as that. So something to keep an eye out for, particularly with these small sizes.
Yeah.
That thin font that's working for you here isn't necessarily working for you down here. The other
size.
Yeah, the other thing that you want to look at, and I'm going to ungroup this, is you've got these little identifiers telling you something about what's going on in Seattle, Washington. It's not that it's too small or too big. The vertical line height of this is questionable. And if I redistribute this, and you've done it a little awkwardly in that you have each of these in their own box. But if you look at Seattle, Washington, Fresh Seafood, Picture Perfect Hikes, Live Music Mecca versus Vegas below, this should be more legible to you than this down here. And it's simply because we've added just a little bit of vertical height to the line spacing between each line. The other way you could do this is 18 point. So it's pretty big. 16 or even 14 would be fine. I'm going to stick with 15.
Yeah.
I think the dates are fine. Dates are pretty important. If we align this to bottom and then come back in and adjust, I think that you can pretty quickly see that this is legible in a way that this is very tight.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, there's something else to keep in mind. It's very hard to see what's really going on here on your screen.
Yeah.
You're setting here, like this screen, you're setting here, this screen is larger than your phone.
Yeah.
You know, by a large margin, unless you're on like a 6 Plus. And I can't necessarily tell, but I'm guessing that this is a design for like a 6 or a 5S or 5S or something. You're already holding it closer than you would hold it if you were just walking around with it.
Yeah.
If you're walking around with it, you would have it like down probably twice as far away from your face as you do like when you're sitting in front of the computer designing in Sketch. You're like hunched over and you're like looking in and really focused, and maybe that's the argument that this shouldn't be 15, this should be 16, regardless of which way.
And
what's that?
I said, I think I'm also gonna have to take a look at that again once in the background there is actually a picture of Seattle and kind of what that ends up.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to tell you right now that this light face type is going to wreak havoc on you.
It's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's going to wreak havoc. Okay. You'll probably be able to get away with this, but this stuff typically ends up becoming fodder for treatments like this, where you're coming in and you're like, oh yeah, and I'll do this real punk rock thing where I'll make the fill darker and I'll reverse this out. And what you're really saying is, yeah, I couldn't figure out how to get that type to stand out on its own. So I started putting all these little little tricks in here to
start to duct tape it.
Yep, you're starting to duct tape it. That's exactly it. I actually had a couple of duct tape samples that I would use at my old job that I would occasionally break out to do exactly this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like, okay, well, that's fine, it's doable, but is that really what we want? You know, was that the design you set out to create? I think the design that you set out to create was one that was cleaner. You know, and you might be asking yourself, well, how do I get to that design?
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably a combination of putting some sort of overlay onto this. So if you said, okay, hey, my opacity is now 30, and I'm going to make this darker, it's probably some sort of combination of this where, you know, you have an image with an overlay on top of it, and then this content, and this content's probably in white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm having to guess, this content is now like this. But these are considerations that you have to think about ahead of time, because if you don't, it's like, oh, I didn't think about this. I have to reconsider the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not what we want to do. So there's a couple of considerations there. You know, spacing,
mm-hmm.
type being reversed out, bold versus light at small sizes. This is pretty much the same thing, although I think you've added in some top icons that were pretty much below before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they were down here. So what happens here when this scrolls? Is this like a, does this get like a line? Or does this scroll at all? You know, is taking off from Phoenix, Arizona always here and only this part scrolls?
Yeah, I think probably taking off from Phoenix, Arizona always stays, and then the bottom scrolls.
Okay. Keep in mind that's going to limit your visible space quite a bit. What you might want to do is have a situation where basically this can scroll off screen, like it goes up, and then basically you get something like this where
it catches.
It basically reinserts itself into the top of the app.
Mm-hmm.
So, like from or taking off now, this is like 12 centered, and I think you get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of ways.
Collapse there as it usually
yeah.
scroll.
So as this scrolls up, then this comes down.
Okay.
But it's all in there. Although I do like the way that you've done this organization. What are you looking to book at this time? How many people? These are all situations where that airship, if you will, begins to come into play, and I want to move it. I think you've probably got that like locked down somewhere. Oh, Driftlist balloon. There it be. Driftlist balloon. Driftless balloon. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's vacation style. This looks a lot cleaner than what you had last week. You know, and I think it's a situation where, you know, you've clearly put a lot more thought into it. I still wonder if the balloon is necessary here.
Yeah.
You know, I see. I see a lot of opportunities here, but the top portion is much better. This is consistent with this, which is consistent with this. I think that is a real strength here in the design that I'm seeing. You're also being very conversational.
Did you say?
Oh, I think there's consistency in the design, but I also think you're being very conversational, which means that this is going to be a more pleasurable experience for people. You know, the only question I have is what happens when this gets clicked? What happens when somebody says, "Yeah, you know what? I am a nature lover. I want to do that thing." You know, I don't think it's fade away.
Yeah.
I think if anything, it's probably some sort of like, oh hey, it's got some active color, and then that jumps over, and you show maybe the icon or something to say that it's been selected. Questions thus far?
No, I think that's very good.
Okay, so as we're rolling through, so you've got a grid view and a list view.
Between two different options.
This would be a great place to do an A/B test with like usability hub, because you have a very clear A/B. That you know which version of the vacation style selector do you prefer, and I think that, you know, version A or version B, and they just click which one they like. I think that sometimes the wordiness gets in the way. It's like shopaholic. Well, I kind of know what that is, and if I didn't, I'd probably rather be somewhere else anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
Time travel or travel timing. This is a place where I think just losing that makes it infinitely better.
All right.
Or you can say, you know, again, this is, hey, it's smaller and it's somewhere else on the screen.
Yeah.
Rather than in the background. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it being smaller, for the record.
I actually like that as kind of almost like the heading or on the status bar, menu bar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, reversing it out to the gray would be the thing that levels that up. Here, you know, I see that you're selecting things and that you've kind of got these selected. I think the very natural thing to do here is not to necessarily outline it. It's more to, there we go. It's more to basically
change the,
yeah,
like have a selector color.
That, you know, whatever the selector color is, instead of trying to do the outline.
Okay.
So we've gone through quite a bit thus far. Now we're into the actual drifts, if you will. So somebody is drifting from Phoenix, and they've said $550 per person. You've given them their options.
And obviously those numbers would be below 7 or below 550.
Right. I wasn't reading too much into that. I like the icons as well. I think that, you know, you establish what the icons are, and then you put them into use. This I think is just a list view of, or this will get me to a list view of this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And is this share? Is that what that is?
This is the filters.
Right. Okay. Because it's a filter. Duh. Okay. And do we have is this our filter view? Yeah. Okay. So filters, you've said that these are the activities that you want. The duration is that, and here's my budget. Yeah, this is pretty good, in my opinion. Again, this is a situation where instead of doing the outline, I might simply suggest, yeah, just there you go, or whatever the color that you want it to use is. Just make it consistent through the app.
Yeah.
And anywhere that something has been tapped, it's going to turn to that color.
Yeah.
As we continue to go here. Create an account to save your Driftlist. Here, I look at these, and this is another situation where some vertical height would probably help you out. You still want to have space between the three elements here. If you've selected email, you can guess what I'm going to do here. This goes to that, right? So again, it's about consistency here. This is great. This needs help.
Yeah.
Origin travelers budget per person feels like one thing, includes duration, months, and activities feels like another. You've got the right idea here, but I think that you're attempting to make it happen in very tight quarters. So maybe this is where we come in and say, okay, the line height here is, yeah.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily have to come in and give it a line, like you don't have to come in and add line work, like so. Like I don't expect you to come in and do that sort of level, but I do think that some sort of spreading of the content apart would be helpful. And in some cases, the stuff's budget per person.
Yeah.
30 might be too much, but 20 might be just enough. Where these two-line things are getting proper care.
Okay.
Okay. And you can kind of see the difference between the two. Yeah, it's pretty much night and day.
Yeah.
So destination images. Okay. This is where we get into some additional concerns. Why is that? Oh, it's probably because we're trying to squeeze all of this into appearing above the hotel details. I had to guess. So if here we came in and said, okay, you know what? Actually, I'm just going to change leave. Leave will be a medium. Return will be a medium. Okay, so that's adding a fair amount of information here. And now if I said, item here at Skyport, it's going to be 23 under, and CTAC is going to be 23 under. This already is becoming more legible And again, very little
Mm-hmm.
has changed.
Yeah.
It's just adding the right amount of white space. And in this case, I'm not necessarily wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Although there's nothing wrong with it. I mean,
Yeah.
24, 25. Like if you look at 25 here from where it was before,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having that little bit of white space.
It's much more airy.
Yeah, and then your hotel details are below. I also would argue that instead of doing this indentation thing,
Mm-hmm.
weird. Why did that? Oh, it's not grouped. Got it. Now, do you have any idea why the indentation here isn't such a big deal?
Mm-hmm.
Why would that be?
Oh, what's that? Sorry.
Do you have any idea why the indentation wouldn't be such a big deal here?
Oh, because there's enough hierarchy between and space.
Right, like your label here,
and then the
has a
bold, and then
and then the space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So everything else is working together. Indent is redundant, almost.
Yeah, I believe this is all working better together. You know, this is a situation where it's just too tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that there's a lot here that's like, oh, I don't want to necessarily break this up or that up or the other up. But when I look at this with just a little bit of space in it, the app is just friendlier.
Mm-hmm.
Just by default, the app is much more of a pleasant pleasant thing to consume.
Yeah.
If you look at it through here, and one thing I like to do is I like to go through and just, oh goodness, that's no good. I like to go through and just make a copy of things. Now you can duplicate these things as well, but it puts it all the way at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I dislike that.
Yeah, because it shoots all the way to the end.
Yeah, but there are several areas where you can do that same basic trick with the space.
Mm-hmm.
Driftlist destination details is one of them. The blank purchase screen, the vacation travel details, the flight information, the review of the traveler's document, the flight information. And what you may say to yourself, well, this is the standard for anybody who's using one of these apps. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it is. But we shouldn't necessarily aim. We should always aim to beat their best, whoever they are.
Yeah.
So if their best is this, we shouldn't try to mimic it. We should try to improve upon it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does this all make sense?
It's been very helpful. I think that the types of, handling the spacing has been a big issue. I think in my mind, I'm thinking it needs this particular area and not totally considering the scroll, that it's okay that they need to scroll maybe a little bit below to get like more information.
Yeah. So let's just, I want to duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate it again because I want to look at a before and after on this review vacation details. Okay. If we just kind of zoom in real quick, we apply the thinking, that this is going to be like medium. We're not even saying bold. We're saying medium. And then we come in here. Actually, I remember correctly, we just said this was like 22. This was 22. And this information is going to be here. Let's go ahead and keep in mind, this is interesting. It's 14 point in size. I don't necessarily think that it needs to be that large. And you have another interesting issue here, and it is it held under this name or is it held under this name or this name?
The top name.
The top name. How would we solve for this confusion? It's a really easy solution.
I thought I thought originally my thought would be proximity, but I obviously had some tightness issues there.
Okay, so let's group these, right? Here's that. And you're probably still right. There probably is still some proximity things. And there's also this. I don't necessarily know if that review vacation details is needed when I have purchase details right there at the top.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's adjust this. This is interesting. It's got 1 star, but it says 4.0. Seems like that would be it seems like that's on a 4-point scale, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
This is being really difficult all of a sudden. We said 22 here. Maybe there's some bits of information here that really need more help. One standard, one queen is one of those, I think. Just adding maybe it's just a light italic. That helps. Maybe this motif hotel needs to be a medium.
Yeah.
And again, this is really all about making sure that you have ample support for the information that you are displaying. Rather than just kind of throwing things out there.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just really quickly look at these side by side. Actually. Thoughts?
Yeah.
The biggest issue here is really these two things being the same size. It's like I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to start. But once you add these bulbs in here and here, it gives you a couple of anchors to try to have your eyes grab onto. And then giving this space to breathe, you don't necessarily need lines across, but you do need space to breathe. Okay?
Yeah.
And then obviously you see the motif hotel. The star ratings are now star ratings. the bold, again, it helps your eye hook in. The standard queen, one queen bed tells you more about it. And then now I'm also not confused by whose reservation this is held under. I know it's Beyonce's. Will make all the people watching this happy years from now. So, questions. You do have one
it's
thing
definitely a big difference.
You do have one thing up here that's interesting. It's that this really doesn't line up. Like what happens when you get Dulles International Airport. I guess actually Dulles is pretty okay. Let's do this. John F. Kennedy International Airport. This is where the information that you can provide up front is probably helpful. And what I mean by that is, so we know THX is ubiquitous, right? Like that is the airport code. All right, so now you can say and you're done. And the airport part of it is something that you probably don't need.
Yeah.
So thoughts?
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that for sure, especially once we're talking about other destinations, I think. But yeah, no, I feel like definitely much more airy and breathing.
Well, obviously you've got quite a few things to consider, but I do think that you've made huge strides here. I don't think that I don't think there's anything that's like, oh crap, why did you do that? But I do think that if you can A, look for places to simplify, B, look for ways to get away from doing the outlines and using more solid colors and tones, and then C, and put this into an A/B test, like when you get a chance. But C, let's look at how we really add hierarchy to our content, because when you get down here in the flight details and the save drift, that's where we really picked up big gains. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Obviously, so for our next session, I'm going to be looking for the updates to the actual content that you've created here. But I'm also going to be looking for your Envision prototype to reflect the changes that you've made. And then really it's testing time. How exciting is that?
That sounds good.
All right. Well, Samantha, absolute pleasure. Thanks for participating today and letting us work through this in a recorded screencast. And we'll have to do this again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. We'll talk soon. Email me if you have any questions, okay? All right. Bye.
Yes. All right. Bye-bye.